A priest, a minister, and a missionary found themselves outside of the pearly gates. The priest called out through the gates, "Oi, St. Peter! I believe if you look in your book, you'll find me name written there." "Why?" "Well, you see, I've served the Mass for many a year now, and have done many meritorious deeds." Peter leafed through the book. Then the minister called out, "Aye, Apostle Peter, I believe if you look in your book, you'll find me name written there." "Why?" "Oh, well, you know, it was predestined to be there, and my life has borne the fruit thereof." Peter continued to leaf through the book. Then the minister called out, "Hey, oh, Brother Peter, I believe if you look in your book, you will find my name written there." "Why?" "Well, on my 12th birthday, at 12 o'clock noon, I said the sinner's prayer, and I made my decision of faith." Peter continued to leaf through the book, came to the end, and shut it. He looked through the gate and said, "Well, boys, I'm sorry. I'm only finding one name here. Is one of you called Lazarus?" "Are any of you called Lazarus? What's that supposed to mean?" Have you ever felt like that, where you've been on the outside of a joke and it doesn't seem to make any sense? If you've done any traveling to foreign countries and heard some of their humor, perhaps you're shaking your head. "I don't get it. This doesn't make sense to me." Because simply we don't understand the culture, and we don't understand maybe the sense of humor that they have. The same goes with stories. Some people don't get the Bible because they don't understand the culture, the context. Shakespeare, the same thing. Oh, look at that language and those kings dying off. What's this all about? Unless we understand the context of a story or of a joke, we might not get it. Jesus was the greatest joke teller who ever lived. I mean, come on, he's Jewish, right? Jewish people love jokes. In case you haven't noticed, they're some of the greatest humorists, and they have been throughout history. Jesus is in this context of joke telling, and here Jesus is not some dry, boring guy walking around telling people off and then maybe telling some nice stories. Jesus was anointed with the oil of gladness above his companions. That's what it says in Hebrews 1. He's wild and ecstatic with joy, and he's exposing certain people. The people who are on their high horses, the pompous asses, the self-important ones, those people we often ridicule even to this day. They need to be taken down a few notches. And this is what Jesus did to the religious elites, to the scribes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the teachers of the law, those people who were justifying themselves and who were self-important and self-indulgent. Jesus told stories against them. For example, he said, "You teachers of the law, you strain out the gnat and swallow the camel." Today it would be like saying, "Hey, buddy, you're straining out the dirt to get in your coffee, but oh, you're going to drink that nice lump of poop in there. Enjoy." Okay, we might not understand the gnat and camel reference so much today. Jesus, he seemed to use this camel humor, right? It's easier for a camel to pass through an eye of the needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. What is Jesus going on about these camels always? And some people have taken Jesus quite literally and said, oh, Jesus, what he actually meant was there was this hole in the wall and there was a gate, a small gate, and the camel had to get down on its knees and it had to crawl through to get through into the city. The people show that they're not getting the joke. Jesus is using hyperbole, exaggeration, to show it's almost impossible for rich people to enter the kingdom of God. And this is the context of Lazarus and the rich man. The rich people, the self-important teachers of the law, the Pharisees, the scribes, the Sadducees, all of these types of people, Jesus was often telling his parables against. The parable of the rich fool building up the barns to store things away for himself, but One night his life is taken away, he can't take it with him. Or the parable of the Good Samaritan, the priest and the Levite passing by the man naked at the side of the road and bleeding. They pass by, but hey, who helps him? A Samaritan, a dog, and takes care of the Jewish beaten man. Jesus is telling these types of jokes against a target audience. There is a label we can give for this type of parable or story. It's called a satire. Satire uses humor, it uses wit, often causes laughter as we poke fun at a particular object, people, ideas, worldviews, actions. These types of things are ridiculed. And satire will often use some type of irony, maybe verbal irony, saying one thing and meaning something different, where there can be even a sustained verbal irony, where the audience is led through a story and then at the end there's some reversal and they understand, oh, it wasn't to be taken literally. It may be a situational irony as well, where we expect one thing and then the opposite happens. Jesus uses satire and irony in telling Lazarus and the rich man, and he does so with a particular subgenre of satire, something called parody. Parody, maybe you're familiar with this. When I'm teaching my course on satire to my college students, I ask them, what is parody? And somebody might call out, yeah, baby, yeah. They get it, that Austin Powers is a parody of James Bond, of the British spy film. So parody, what it does, it takes a serious genre or style of film or of literature, takes something serious and then mocks it. It enters the world of that serious genre, and from the inside it makes fun of it or it criticizes it. There's often a very critical element of parody as well. So with Austin Powers, the former James Bond type, I'm Bond, James Bond, you know, that suave, debonair leading man, the spy, is now the crazy hair, big, thick, black glasses and gnarly teeth. Yeah, baby, yeah. Parody. We might not understand what parody is unless we understand the source. You might not find this accent very funny right now if you haven't heard this type of accent before. Maybe unless we understand what somebody is trying to imitate or mock, we might not laugh at it, or we might not get it. So we have to understand that Lazarus and the rich man is in fact a parody. We have to understand its source. What is the source for Lazarus and the rich man from which Jesus was drawing? Well, the Pharisees had certain types of stories that they had been telling. There had been generations of stories been passed around late Second Temple Judaism, and these were apocalyptic stories. Some of them were jokes, like I started off this video with the pearly gates story. Those were common during Jesus' time. But there were other stories as well, apocalyptic stories, and I don't mean end of the world stories, but revelatory stories of what the other world is like. What is Hades like? What is Abraham's bosom like? There were many stories of the afterlife, and these involved characters like Abraham in some of these Jewish apocalypses, who is an intercessory figure. There might be angels in there flying around, taking people from one place to the other. There might be flames. There is the reference to Hades in these types of stories, and the two places, the place of punishment and flames, and the place of paradise at Abraham's bosom. All of these things were common to the ancient apocalypses of late Second Temple Judaism, of which the Pharisees were part. Their tradition was full of these ideas. It was part of their worldview. And we need to understand some stories in particular that are similar to Lazarus and the rich man. Because Jesus wasn't just telling some new story. He was giving the Pharisees a story that they had heard before. Or certain elements were similar to what they had heard before. And that's how parodies work. You say, oh, I get this, yeah. So let me tell you a story that is probably one of the sources from which Jesus was taking. If it's not this one, it's one of the other ones that were like it. There are 7 that we even have to this day that are very similar to Lazarus and the rich man. This story is taken from the Palestinian, sometimes called the Jerusalem Talmud. It was written down hundreds of years after Jesus, but it is said to be around the time of Jesus. So here's how the story goes. There are 2 characters in this story, 2 primary characters, and they die on the same day. One is named Bar Maayan. He's given a name, Bar Maayan. He is the tax collector. Oh, the dirty tax collector. Now the Jews, when they heard of tax collectors, even during Jesus' time, oh, dirty tax collector. And so there's Bar Maayan, the tax collector, and there is the nameless, poor Torah student. So these 2 people, Bar Maayan, the tax collector, and the poor, nameless Torah student, die on the same day. And the friend of the poor Torah student, he doesn't have a name, but we'll just call him Max. So I'll just call him Max. Max is crying out, "Oh, I'm so sad for my friend, my poor friend, the Torah student. He didn't receive a good burial. And look, this Bar Maayan, dirty tax collector, he received such a great funeral. Why is this? Why is this? You know, the enemies of Israel are rejoicing." Well, this guy, Max, the friend, has a dream. And in the dream, he sees in the afterlife the fate of these 2 characters. He sees Bar Maayan and he sees his friend. And the friend, the poor Torah scholar, says, "Well, you know, Bar Maayan, in this life, he did one good deed." What was that good deed? Well, one day he had invited all the rich people of the community of our town, Ashkelon, to come in and have a feast with him. Hey, but no one came. So Bar Maayan said, "I'm not going to let all this food go to waste. Open up the gates. Everyone can come in. You know, all those poor people, feed them. Let's get on with it." It's also said Bar Maayan may have been walking down the road one day and dropped a loaf of bread, and a poor man saw the loaf of bread on the ground and crawled over and took it and slunked off. But Bar Maayan said, "I'm not going to get embarrassed over this, so let's go on." Well, Max says Bar Maayan did one good deed, and for that one good deed, he received his one great reward, and that was a great burial, where the people came out and mourned him. But I, the poor Torah scholar, I did one bad deed in this life. What did I do? I put on the phylacteries in the wrong order. I should have put on one before the other on the head and the hand, but I reversed it. And I received my punishment for that one bad deed. I was not mourned properly. I didn't receive the proper burial that I deserved. But now, in the afterlife, I'm rewarded for that good deed, the many good deeds that I did. Basically it's revealed that he did many good deeds. But Bar Maayan, now he is punished for his many bad deeds. And then some time later, the friend Max sees the fate in the other world, in Hades. He sees in the good place, his friend, the poor Torah scholar, now is in paradise, and there are fruits and vegetables and such a wonderful garden where he is. And where's Bar Maayan? Well, look down low. He's in the bad place in Hades, and the Max sees Bar Maayan on the ground, crawling on the ground with his tongue out, trying to get to a river to get a drink of water. He can never get there because the river keeps moving away from him. So this is the story of Bar Maayan and the poor Torah scholar. We might see some similarities here with Lazarus and the rich man. Jesus, you plagiarist. So we see that he's plagiarizing maybe this story or certain stories very much similar to it. What we have is two characters dying on the same day, and then there's some otherworldly revelation, and there we see the reversal of fate according to a criteria, their good or bad deeds, according to their karma. So these types of stories Jesus is using to expose the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and other people as well, the religious elites. And also what he's trying to expose here is the foreign element. Build a wall. The foreign element within the story. You see, these stories were not Jewish stories per se. Jesus plagiarizes this Jewish story that was, in fact, plagiarized from other sources. You see, that same story, Bar Maayan and the poor Torah scholar, has an Egyptian source. An ancient Egyptian story called Setme and See Osiris. Same thing. Two people dying on the same day, rich and poor, and then the reversal in the afterlife and the revelation in the afterlife. And the punishments are almost exactly the same. There's even a description of people being punished on door hinges, being pierced through door hinges. The exact same description in the two stories. It seems that Jesus is also at the same time exposing the foreign element, as he had been saying, you cannot serve God and Mammon. This is the context Jesus is exposing, because the Jews, we must remember, in 586 BC were carried into captivity, into Babylon. And as they came into contact with the Babylonians, and then later the Persians, and then the Greeks, and then the Romans, and other cultures like the Egyptians, these cultures, the Jews found they all had these stories of the afterlife. They all have explanations of why good people suffer in this life and why bad people prosper. They all have theodicies, explanation of their God or God's justice. So you may get bad in this life, but you'll get good in the next life if you do good. That's the moral of all of those stories. And the whole purpose of those stories is to cause people to change. The otherworldly stories, the revelatory stories that the Greeks had, that Homer told, that Plato told, that various other writers told, these otherworldly journeys. The purpose was that the one figure would see the other world, or a figure be sent back from the other world, so that people would change. So the Jews had incorporated these foreign elements into their stories, particularly the Pharisees, not the Sadducees, because the Sadducees, they were strict keepers of Moses and the law, and Moses and the law, they didn't discuss the afterlife. And the Pharisees, well, they were really, excited about the other world and how we're going to be rewarded in the other world for all the good things God has blessed us with because of fate, and all the good things that we've done on top of that. Hey, we're so great. So the Pharisees were telling these stories as maybe cautionary tales and to keep people in fear to a degree. People use these stories for particular reasons, and we'll explore that a little later. So we're about to dive deep into Hades, but again, we're not supposed to take these stories literally. They are parables. In the same way, if you have seen or read Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, you may remember the story of Ebenezer Scrooge. Remember how Scrooge, bah humbug, Bob Cratchit, you won't be keeping Christmas this year. You'll be coming into work. And, he's ignoring the poor Bob Cratchit and Tiny Tim. Meanwhile, Scrooge has this nighttime, otherworldly revelation, visitations, and journeys where he sees the three spirits, spirit of Christmas past, present, and future. And at the end, Scrooge sees himself and has an epiphany. Boo, what have I done? And tries to cross the great chasm back to this world. I want to do it, I'll be good. And he's allowed to return, and he, God bless us, everyone. Give us the turkey to Bob Cratchit and Tiny Tim and all that. So the story ends and resolves happily because of the revelation. Now, the whole purpose of the story, again, is to bring across the cautionary tale. You must repent. You must change, or you'll go to the bad place. But we realize when we hear Dickens' A Christmas Carol, it's not to be taken literally. It was, in fact, a satire of 1800s Victorian England and their mores, their values, especially the values of the rich who are owning some of the workhouses and keeping the poor poor and making more money off of the poor and becoming richer and richer. And this is a similar context, in fact, to Lazarus and the rich man. So it's from understanding that this is, in fact, a parody, a satirical parody, a parable within a parody, within a satire. All of these terms revolve around as Jesus is exposing the religious elite's worldview, exposing them to themselves, not directly, but indirectly. So let's go to hell with Jesus.